The tavern's bioluminescent fungi pulsed in rhythm with the collective mood of the gathered younglings. Their eye stalks swiveled toward me in perfect unison as I settled my carapace onto the worn communal perch. My exoskeleton clicked against the crystalline surface, each sound amplified by the reverent silence. Commander Vextar, one of them chittered, mandibles quivering with excitement. "Tell us about the human." I flexed my primary appendages, the scars along their hardened surface catching the blue light. My thorax expanded as I drew in the methane-rich atmosphere, letting my speech bladders fill before responding. "You think you want to hear about humans," I said, my voice resonator producing the low, authoritative tones that had once commanded legions. "But trust me, younglings, you don't." They collectively pulsed their chromatophores in protest, a kaleidoscope of blues and purples signaling their dissatisfaction. The bartender, old Krazak with his missing limbs and dented thoracic plates, slid a fermentation bulb toward me. The liquid inside glowed with neural stimulants. "Let them hear it, Vex," Krazak said, his voice time-worn and gravelly. "They need to understand what we're up against." I drained the bulb in one long pull, feeling the chemicals cascade through my circulatory system, igniting old neural pathways I'd deliberately kept dormant since the Earth campaign. "Very well," I said, setting down the empty vessel. "But remember, you asked for this story." The younglings extended their sensory filaments, a sign of focused attention in our species. I closed my primary optical organs and let the memories surface. First contact was, by all accounts, a joke among our scout battalions. We had been observing them for cycles, watching their primitive spacecraft barely escape their atmosphere, their clumsy attempts at colonizing their own satellite. Their transmissions were chaotic, disorganized, a species still arguing with itself while attempting venture outward. When the Council finally authorized direct engagement, I commanded the vanguard. My breeding kin and I had conquered 17 sentient species across 3 spiral arms. Our technology was beyond anything humans could comprehend. Our bodies were the product of millions of years of evolutionary perfection, capable of surviving in vacuum, processing multiple information streams simultaneously, and regenerating entire limbs within days. Humans, by comparison, were absurd. "They're so soft," my second-in-command, Zithraz, observed through our shared neural link as we watched the first human settlement through our ship's sensors. "No exoskeleton, no redundant systems. They can't even regulate their body temperature without artificial coverings." I remember laughing, a rippling of my respiratory chambers that expressed our species' equivalent of amusement. "Look at how they move, so inefficient. Only 2 primary appendages for locomotion, and they balance on them like younglings on their first molt day." The assault plans were casual, almost recreational. We deployed a single battle cluster to their largest military installation of power meant to secure immediate surrender. Our warriors, each standing twice the height of their tallest specimens, with 6 articulated limbs capable of wielding multiple weapons simultaneously, descended upon what they called Fort Bragg. The humans' weapons were primitive, kinetic projectiles and basic explosives. Our personal shields deflected them easily. I watched from orbit, already composing my victory address to the Council. Then something changed. The first sign was when 3 of our warriors went offline simultaneously. Not damaged, completely offline. Their neural signatures simply ceased to exist. Impossible. Our warriors were hardwired with triple redundant communication systems. "Sensor malfunctions," Zithraz suggested, but I could sense the uncertainty in her neural patterns. Then 6 more warriors went dark. Then 12. I ordered visual feeds from the remaining ground forces. What I saw defied explanation. The humans were adapting in real time. They had apparently observed that our shields operated on a specific frequency modulation. Within minutes, Minutes. They had recalibrated their primitive weapons to pulse at offsetting frequencies. They were communicating with each other using nothing but crude vocalization and primitive radio waves, yet somehow coordinating complex tactical maneuvers with effective precision. Impossible, I whispered, my hemolymph running cold. They can't be processing information that quickly. But they were, and that wasn't the worst of it. Our warriors reported that injured humans missing limbs, humans with catastrophic damage to their thoracic cavities, continued fighting. A human female with a projectile lodged in her central neural cluster managed to destroy 3 of our warriors before finally ceasing function. "Commander," one of my warriors transmitted, panic evident in his neural signature. "They don't stop. They just keep coming." The battle that was supposed to last microcycles stretched into a full rotation cycle. I deployed 3 more battle clusters, then 5 more. Our casualties mounted in ways that violated every strategic projection. And then I saw it. The moment that still invades my rest cycles, that still causes my chromatophores to pulse with fear when I least expect it. One of our fallen warriors had been captured. The humans surrounded it. Our species' neural systems remain operational for approximately 200 microcycles after catastrophic physical damage, enough time for memory extraction and consciousness transfer in normal circumstances. The humans somehow understood this. With primitive tools, cutting instruments, and crude imaging technology, they began to interface with our warriors' neural system. They were learning, adapting, and worst of all, improvising. Within a single planetary rotation, they had partially decoded our communication protocols. Within 2 rotations, they had replicated aspects of our shield technology. By the 3rd rotation, when I finally ordered a full retreat, they had begun adapting our own weapons to their physiological limitations. "But Commander," one of the younglings interrupted, his chromatophores pulsing skeptically, "how is that possible? Our species' cognitive processing capabilities are objectively superior. Our neural density alone—" "That's what we all thought," I said, my voice resonator dropping to its lowest register. "That's what the Council thought. That's what 17 conquered species across 3 spiral arms thought. But we were all wrong." I extended my scarred primary appendage, the tip of which had been replaced with a crude mechanical substitute. Human design, ironically better than our own medical technology in some respects. The humans have something we don't. Something no species we've encountered possesses. The younglings leaned in, their sensory filaments quivering. "They're not smarter than us. They're not stronger. They're not even more technologically advanced. But they have this capacity, this hunger. They see something new, something dangerous, something they don't understand. And instead of retreating or calculating or waiting for consensus," I paused, my respiratory chambers constricting at the memory. "They improvise. They throw themselves at problems with a completely irrational confidence. They try solutions that have an astronomically low probability of success. And most importantly, they don't wait for permission. Every single human, from their military alpha to their youngest offspring, possesses the autonomy to attempt creative solutions to novel problems." The tavern had gone completely silent. Even old Krezok had extended his sensory filaments toward me. "Do you understand what I'm saying, younglings? In our entire species, maybe a dozen individuals are authorized to develop new tactical approaches. In human society, all of them do it, all the time, without oversight, without planning, without fear of the consequences." I drained another fermentation bulb, my neural pathways now fully awash in stimulants and suppressants in equal measure. The Council thought we could subjugate them as we had all others. But we were wrong. The humans aren't just another species. They're a plague of creativity, a virus of innovation, and they're coming. The Earth campaign wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. My voice resonator produced what our species recognizes as a laugh, but there was no amusement in it, only the hollow echo of terror. You asked to hear about humans? Well, now you have. Sleep well, younglings. While you still can. The younglings sat paralyzed, their chromatophores frozen in patterns of disbelief and horror. The tavern's ambient illumination had dimmed in response to the collective mood shift, casting long shadows across the crystalline surfaces. Outside, the methane rain began to fall, each droplet striking the reinforced dome with a sound like distant war drums. "But, Commander," ventured the boldest of the younglings, their exoskeleton still bearing the pearlescent sheen of recent molting, "surely our technological superiority—" "Technological superiority," I interrupted, my voice resonator producing a harsh, discordant tone that made several of them retract their sensory appendages. "Let me tell you about technological superiority." I extended my damaged primary appendage, the mechanical replacement glinting dully in the low light. With my secondary appendage, I activated the neural implant at the base of my thorax. A holographic display materialized above the table, a three-dimensional rendering of a human male. "This," I said, "is the one they called Sergeant Nathan Reed." The retreat order had been given. Our forces, decimated beyond all strategic projections, were abandoning positions across the North American continent. But my personal transport had been damaged in a primitive but surprisingly effective electromagnetic pulse attack. I was grounded, separated from my command structure with only a squad of 4 warriors for protection. We had taken refuge in what humans called a warehouse, a vast storage structure filled with containers and machinery. My warriors secured the perimeter while I attempted to repair our communication array. Our battle armor remained functional, our weapons at full charge. Despite our situation, we maintained tactical superiority within our immediate environment. That's when we detected a single human biosignature approaching. One human. Kriavax, my most experienced warrior, clicked his mandibles in what our species registers as derision. "Permission to terminate, Commander." "Granted," I said dismissively, focusing on the delicate neural connections of our communication device. "But capture if possible. The research directive would value another specimen." Krivax moved toward the entrance, his battle armor humming with lethal potential. The human single, unarmed, according to our scans, continued approaching at a casual pace. That should have been my first warning sign. Through our shared neural link, I observed as Kriavax positioned himself at the entrance. The human male walked into view. Average height for their species approximately 1.8 meters, dark pigmentation, facial hair, wearing standard military attire, but carrying no visible weapons. "Halt, human," Krivax transmitted through his armor's external speakers. The translation algorithms converting our complex language into their primitive audio patterns. The human stopped, looked directly at Krivax, and smiled. In our species, the exposure of dentition is a death threat, but human facial expressions remained confusing to us then. Was this aggression? Fear? Something else entirely? "Evening," the human said. "Sergeant Nathan Reed, United States Army Rangers. Mind if I come in out of the rain?" Before Krivax could respond, the human was already walking forward, his movements relaxed, hands visible at his sides. Our bioscanners detected elevated heart rate and respiratory function, but nothing indicating fear or aggression by human standards. "Stop or be terminated," Krivax warned, charging his primary weapon. The human, this Sergeant Reed, stopped again. "Look," he said, "I just want to talk. I'm authorized to discuss terms." "Terms," I interjected through the neural link, my attention now fully diverted from the communication repair. "Yes," Reed said, somehow hearing me despite the fact I hadn't used the external communication system. "Terms. As in, how this all ends without further casualties on either side." Krivax's neural patterns registered confusion. Mine did as well. How had the human heard me? Our neural communication operated on frequencies beyond human auditory range. "Approach slowly," I ordered, curiosity overriding caution. "Any hostile movement will result in immediate termination." Reed walked forward with the same casual confidence, hands still visible, eyes scanning our positions with unnerving accuracy. He didn't just look at Kravax, but glanced directly at the positions of my other 3 warriors, positions that should have been invisible to human perception. When he stood 10 meters from my position, I emerged from behind the communication array, my battle armor at full power, all 6 appendages armed with different weapon systems. "You are Sergeant Nathan Reed," I stated. "And you're the commander," he replied without hesitation. "The big boss. The one calling the shots." I did not respond, unsettled by his immediate recognition of my rank. My armor configuration was only subtly different from my warriors', certainly not distinct enough for an untrained human to identify. "How did you find us?" I demanded. Reed shrugged. That peculiar human gesture involving the elevation of their upper limb connectors. "Wasn't hard. You guys give off a specific electromagnetic signature. Your shields, communications, even your neural links, they all operate on predictable frequency patterns." My hemolymph ran cold. This information was classified at the highest levels. Even if humans had captured and studied our technology, they shouldn't have been able to decode our operational frequencies this quickly. "Impossible," I said. "Your species lacks the technological capability to detect, much less decode, our communications." Reed smiled again, but there was something different about it. Something predatory. "You're right, we don't have the tech. Not yet, anyway. But we don't need it." He tapped the side of his head with one finger. "Some of us can just hear it, feel it, right up here." "Deception," Krevix hissed through our neural link. "The human attempts to confuse us, but I wasn't so certain. There was something about this human, something in his neural patterns that our scanners couldn't quite categorize." "Explain," I demanded. Reed took another step forward. My warriors tensed, weapons trained on his vital areas. "Your scientists probably studied our brains, right? Noticed how we only use a small percentage of our neural capacity at any given time. Figured that made us primitive." I didn't confirm, but he was correct. Our initial assessment of human neural architecture had classified their brains as inefficient, wasteful, large portions, seemingly dormant or underutilized. "What you missed," Reed continued, "is why those parts stay dormant. You see, about 1 in every 1,000 humans has what we call neuroplastic hypersensitivity. In normal circumstances, it doesn't do much. Maybe makes them a little more intuitive, a little better at picking up patterns, but under extreme stress." He took another step forward. "Under extreme stress, those dormant neural pathways activate. The brain rewires itself in real time, forming new connections, processing information in ways it never could before. We call it crisis adaptation." Another step. He was now close enough that I could see the pupils of his eyes dilate and contract as he spoke. "When your forces attacked, when you started killing us by the thousands, you created the perfect conditions for crisis adaptation on a mass scale. People who never showed a hint of neuroplastic hypersensitivity suddenly developed it. Those who already had it, their abilities amplified exponentially. That is biologically impossible," I stated, though uncertainty had begun to infiltrate my neural patterns. "No species can rewire its neural architecture in response to external stimuli. The energy requirements alone." "That's where you're wrong," Reed interrupted. "Human brains are energy hogs. We burn through glucose at a rate that would be considered pathologically inefficient by your standards. But that inefficiency, it's actually our greatest strength. It gives us neurological flexibility." With shocking speed, Reed closed the distance between us. Before my warriors could fire, he was standing directly before me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his soft, fragile body. "Watch," he said quietly. And then, to my horror, He spoke directly into our neural link, not through technology but through his mind. Your shield frequency is modulating at 372.5 terahertz, with a quantum variance of 0.03. Your neural links operate on a subspace carrier wave that shifts between 18 frequencies in a predictable pattern. I can hear all of it. I can feel it. And I can change how my brain processes it. Impossible. Completely impossible. And yet, his neural signature was somehow interfacing with our communication network, crudely, imperfectly, but undeniably. In that moment, I understood the true horror of what we faced. It wasn't just their adaptability or their unpredictable tactics. It was evolution happening before our eyes. Humans transforming in response to an existential threat. So here's the deal, Reed continued aloud, stepping back to a less threatening distance. You're going to tell your council that Earth is off limits, that humans aren't just another species to be conquered, that we're something else entirely. And if we refuse? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Reed's expression changed then. The smile disappeared, replaced by something cold and implacable. Then what happened at Fort Bragg will look like a warm-up exercise. Because right now, across this planet, millions of humans are developing abilities we never knew were possible. Some can sense your technology like I can. Others can interface with it. Some can even disrupt it with nothing but concentrated thought. He gestured to his head again. We're weaponizing our own evolution, Commander. And we're just getting started. The tavern had gone completely silent. Even the ambient sounds of the methane rain seemed muted, as though the very atmosphere was holding its breath. You surrendered? Asked the youngest of the group, her voice barely a whisper. No, I said, my voice resonator producing the low tones of profound regret. I didn't believe him. I ordered my warriors to fire. The younglings' chromatophores pulsed with anticipation. None of their weapons discharged. Somehow Reed had interfaced with them on a neural level, disrupted the connection between command and execution. My warriors stood frozen, their most basic functions compromised by the proximity of this single unarmed human. I extended my damaged appendage again, the mechanical replacement now seeming more ominous in the dim light. Reed approached me then, told me he was taking me prisoner, that their scientists wanted to study a commander-level neural architecture. When I resisted, I flexed the mechanical appendage, the crude hydraulics whirring. He didn't use a weapon. He simply looked at my armor's neural interface, and suddenly my primary appendage was being crushed by my own battle systems. The pain was instructive. Around the table, the younglings' postures had changed. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something our species rarely displays in public: raw, undisguised fear. You're telling us, said the bold one who had questioned me earlier, that humans can interface with our technology using only their neural capacity, without implants or augmentation. Not all of them, I clarified. Perhaps not even most, but enough, and they're breeding for it now, intentionally selecting mates with neuroplastic hypersensitivity, producing offspring with even greater capacities. The implications settled over the group like a toxic cloud. The Council classified this information, of course, I continued. Official records state that we withdrew from Earth due to resource allocation priorities. The truth, that we encountered a species undergoing accelerated neurological evolution in direct response to our aggression, was deemed too destabilizing for general knowledge. Old Krazak approached, sliding another fermentation bulb toward me. His voice, when he spoke, was grave. The younglings needed to hear this. Vex, the Defense Ministry is making noise about a second Earth campaign. They're saying our technology has advanced enough to overcome human resistance. I absorbed this information with a ripple of horror through my chromatophores. Then the Council has learned nothing. The humans won't be where we left them. They'll have continued adapting, continued evolving. And this time, I left the thought unfinished, but I could see in the pulsing patterns of the younglings' chromatophores that they understood. The universe had suddenly become a much darker, much more frightening place. A place where evolutionary constants weren't constant at all, where a species could reshape itself in response to threat, where technological superiority meant nothing against the terrifying plasticity of the human mind. "So what do we do?" asked the bold one, her voice steadier than I expected. I drained the fermentation bulb in a single motion, my neural pathways now swimming with chemicals designed to dull the memories that still haunted me. "We pray," I said simply, "that they decide to leave us alone." The methane rain intensified outside, each droplet striking the reinforced dome with increasing urgency. The tavern's bioluminescent lighting pulsed erratically, mirroring the collective anxiety that had seized the gathering. Several younglings had retracted their sensory appendages entirely, a defensive posture rarely seen in social settings. Old Krazak moved silently among them, distributing calming pheromones through the tavern's ventilation system. I flexed my mechanical appendage, the crude hydraulics whirring in the silence. The younglings watched the movement, transfixed by this physical reminder of human capability. "You think you understand the threat now," I said, my voice resonator dropped to its lowest, most intimate register. "You think neuroplastic adaptation explains our retreat. You're wrong." The bold youngling, the one who had questioned me repeatedly, extended her eye stalks further, her chromatophores pulsing with a pattern of intense curiosity mingled with fear. "There's more," she whispered. I activated my neural implant again. The holographic display above our table shifted from the image of Sergeant Reed to a visual recording. The younglings drew back collectively as they recognized the setting. An interrogation chamber aboard a council research vessel. The timestamp indicated this recording was from the final phase of the Earth campaign. "After my capture," I explained, "I was held in a human military research facility for 73 rotation cycles. I was studied, but I also observed. What I witnessed there led directly to the Council's final human protocol." The recording began to play. The interrogation chamber's sterile environment was instantly recognizable. Our standard containment protocols for potentially hazardous species. Within the neurally shielded cell restrained to an examination platform was Sergeant Nathan Reed. "This was 3 weeks after my capture," I explained. "The neural dampening fields should have rendered him unconscious, or at minimum, suppressed his anomalous abilities. Our rescue operation had succeeded in retrieving me and taking him as a specimen for study." In the recording, 3 of our senior researchers surrounded Reed's restrained form. Their exoskeletons bore the distinctive markings of the Biological Understanding Directive, our most advanced xenobiological research division. "This human," stated the lead researcher, "displays unprecedented neural activity despite Class 4 suppression fields. Previous specimens became non-responsive under Class 2 fields." The researchers adjusted their instruments, increasing the neural suppression to levels that would incapacitate even our most resilient warriors. Reed remained conscious, his vital signs stable. "How are you maintaining neural function?" the lead researcher demanded. On the recording, Reed's face displayed that same unsettling human expression, the bearing of dentition that we had come to recognize as a smile. "Practice," Reed replied simply. The researchers conferred through their neural link, a conversation not captured in the audio recording but one I had reviewed in the mission logs. "They were confused," I narrated for the younglings. "All previous human specimens had succumbed to our neural suppression technology. Yet this one, this apparently ordinary human soldier, was not just conscious but coherent." In the recording, the lead researcher approached Reed with a neural probe, a device designed to directly access and map neural pathways. "We will examine your neural architecture directly," the researcher stated. Reed's expression changed then, the smile fading into something more contemplative. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The researcher ignored the warning, activating the neural probe and initiating contact with Reed's temporal lobe. What happened next caused several of the younglings to emit involuntary stress pheromones. On the recording, the lead researcher suddenly convulsed, all 6 appendages contracting violently. The neural probe dropped from his grasp as he collapsed, his exoskeleton clattering against the chamber floor. The other researchers rushed to his aid, but it was too late. The lead researcher's neural patterns had completely collapsed, his mind effectively erased. I paused the recording. The full sequence is classified beyond my authorization level, I explained. But what happened next fundamentally altered our understanding of humans. The younglings' chromatophores pulsed with synchronized patterns of fear and confusion. Did the human attack somehow? One of them asked. Not physically, I replied. The restraints remained intact. The neural dampening field remained active. The human did not move. I reset my voice resonator, preparing to communicate concepts that remained difficult to articulate in our language. What the biological understanding directive discovered, what led directly to the final human protocol, was that human consciousness is not what we thought it was. I reactivated the holographic display, replacing the interrogation recording with a comparative neural diagram, our species' neural architecture alongside a human's. Our consciousness, I explained, indicating our neural diagram, is linear, organized, efficient. Each neural pathway serves a specific function. Our thoughts, our memories, our very identities exist as discrete packets of information stored in specific regions of our neural matrix. This organization is what makes our technology possible. Our neural links, our collective data sharing, our entire society is built on the predictable patterns of our consciousness. I shifted focus to the human neural diagram. Human consciousness is different. Their neural pathways are chaotic, redundant, constantly changing. Their thoughts don't exist in specific locations, but emerge from patterns of activity across their entire neural system. Their memories aren't stored discretely, but are reconstructed anew each time they're accessed. Even their sense of identity, what they call self, is not fixed, but continuously reimagined. The younglings stared at the diagram, struggling to comprehend. When our researcher attempted to access Reed's neural architecture directly, I continued, he encountered something our science had never conceived possible. Human consciousness is not just contained within their neural system, it's recursive. Recursive, the bold youngling questioned. Like a computational loop. Similar but vastly more complex, I replied. Human consciousness observes itself. It thinks about its own thinking. It creates models of itself within itself. When our researcher attempted to map Reed's neural pathways, Reed's consciousness recognized the intrusion and responded. I gestured to the frozen image of the collapsed researcher. The human consciousness created a neural feedback loop, a conceptual trap specifically designed to overwhelm our researchers' more rigidly structured neural architecture. Reed didn't just defend against the probe, he weaponized his own consciousness against it. Silence descended on the tavern as the implications settled over the gathering. But that would require the human to understand our neural architecture, one of the younglings protested. To create an effective attack, he would need intimate knowledge of how our minds function. Precisely, I said, the memory causing my chromatophores to pulse with involuntary patterns of distress. And that's what I witnessed during my time in human captivity. That's what led to the final human protocol. I deactivated the holographic display, allowing darkness to reclaim the space above our table. Humans don't just adapt neurologically under stress, I explained, my voice resonator barely above a whisper. They don't just develop new capabilities or interface with technology. They do something far more dangerous, something no species we've encountered can do. I paused, ensuring I had their complete attention. They empathize. The younglings' confusion was evident in their posture. This was not the revelation they had expected. You don't understand, I continued. Human empathy isn't just emotional projection, it's a cognitive function, an evolved neural capability, that allows them to model other minds within their own consciousness. They don't just imagine how others might feel, they simulate entire consciousness structures. They create working models of other beings' thought processes inside their own minds. Understanding began to dawn in their chromatophore patterns. During my captivity, humans studied me, but not just my biology or my technology. They studied how I thought, how I perceived, how my consciousness functioned, and they didn't need neural probes or mind-link technology. They did it through observation, through interaction, through their natural empathic modeling. I extended my mechanical appendage again, the crude human design now carrying new significance. By the time I was rescued, by the time we captured Reed for study, humans had already developed a functional understanding of our consciousness architecture, not through technological analysis, but through empathic simulation. Reed didn't need to know the technical specifications of our neural systems. He had developed an intuitive model of how our minds worked, and that allowed him to create a conceptual weapon specifically designed to overload our neural pattern. The tavern had grown so quiet that the sound of my hydraulic appendage seemed thunderous as I clenched it into a fist. The council reviewed the research data from Reed and 17 other captured humans. The findings were classified at the highest level and led directly to the final human protocol. A single human, given enough interaction with any sentient species, can develop an intuitive understanding of that species' consciousness, and once they understand how a mind works, they can influence it, manipulate it, or if necessary, destroy it, not through technology but through pure conceptual warfare. "Impossible," whispered one of the younglings. "No biological system could be that adaptable." "That's what makes humans unique," I said. "Their entire evolutionary history shaped them for this capability. Their ancestors were pursuit predators who needed to predict the behavior of both prey and competitors. Their social structures required them to model the intentions and thoughts of others within their groups. Their chaotic, inefficient neural architecture, the very thing we initially dismissed as primitive, enables a form of consciousness that can recursively model other forms of consciousness." I gestured toward the dome above us, toward the stars beyond. "We've conquered 17 species across 3 spiral arms because our technology is superior. The Sevlar conquered 12 systems because their biological weapons are unmatched. The Quantum Collective controls the galactic core because their mathematical insights give them mastery over space-time itself. Every dominant species has a specific evolutionary advantage that grants them power." My chromatophores pulsed with the pattern that signifies existential dread, a pattern rarely displayed in public, but one I could no longer suppress. Humans are the only species we've encountered whose evolutionary advantage is understanding the advantages of others. They don't just adapt to environments, they adapt to minds. Given enough time in contact with any species, they will understand that species' consciousness at an intuitive level that exceeds even that species' understanding of itself. Old Krazak approached our table again, his weathered exoskeleton bearing the scars of conflicts long past. "Tell them about the protocol, Vex," he said quietly. "They need to know." I nodded, my sensory appendages briefly touching my thoracic plates in the gesture that acknowledges a difficult truth. The final human protocol was implemented immediately after the Reed incident, I explained. It contains 3 primary directives that govern all potential contact with humans. I extended one segment of my appendage. First, no direct neural interface with human subjects under any circumstances. Any attempt to access human consciousness directly is forbidden. I extended a second segment. Second, limited exposure protocol for all personnel. No individual of our species is permitted more than 12 consecutive hours of interaction with humans. This prevents humans from developing complete empathic models of our consciousness. I extended a third segment. Third, and most important, Earth and all human-controlled territories are classified as Exclusion Zone Alpha. No contact, no observation, no interaction of any kind without explicit council authorization at the highest level. The bold younglings' chromatophores pulsed with a pattern indicating deep thought. "You're saying we're afraid of them," she said. "Not a question, a statement." "No," I corrected. "Fear is an appropriate response to danger. What the Council established with the final human protocol goes beyond fear. It's recognition of an existential paradigm shift." I rose from the communal perch, my aged exoskeleton creaking with the movement. Throughout our history, we believed consciousness was a tool, a biological function that processed information and guided behavior. We built our civilization, our technology, our very understanding of intelligence on that premise. I gestured toward my mechanical appendage. Humans showed us that consciousness can be a weapon, perhaps, the ultimate weapon. They can turn our own minds against us, not through technology, but through understanding. They can find weaknesses in our thinking that we ourselves don't recognize. They can create cognitive structures specifically designed to disrupt, confuse, or destroy other forms of consciousness. The younglings' chromatophores had synchronized into a uniform pattern of comprehension tinged with horror, the first time I had seen such perfect alignment among them. The research data suggested, I continued, that Reed had developed this capability in less than 3 months of studying our species. The Council's xenopsychologists projected that, given a year of cultural exchange, humans could develop consciousness weapons capable of rendering our entire species effectively non-sentient, not through physical means, but through the introduction of cognitive structures that our minds simply cannot process without collapsing. I moved toward the tavern's exit, pausing before the translucent membrane that separated us from the methane storm outside. "You asked why I warned you about humans," I said, addressing the entire gathering now. "Why I insisted you understand the threat they pose. It's because the Council is wrong. Isolation is not a sustainable strategy. Eventually, humans will expand beyond their current territories. Eventually, contact will be inevitable." The membrane parted as I prepared to depart, allowing a brief surge of cold methane to swirl through the tavern. "When that day comes," I said, "our survival will depend not on our technology or our biology, but on our ability to recognize the truth about humans, the truth I learned through blood and loss. They are not merely another species to be studied or conquered. They are mirrors that reflect our own consciousness back at us, distorted into weapons we cannot defend against." I stepped through the membrane, but turned back for a final observation. In all our expansion across the galaxy, we categorized species by their capabilities, physical strength, technological achievement, biological resilience, but humans cannot be categorized this way. Their true power isn't what they can do, it's what they can become. Given enough time in contact with any intelligence, humans don't just understand it, they absorb it, incorporate it, transform themselves into something perfectly evolved to exploit its weaknesses. The younglings watched me through the semi-transparent membrane, their eye stalks fully extended, absorbing my final warning. The Council calls humans dangerous because they can adapt to our weapons, interface with our technology, even attack our neural networks. But that's not what makes them the most formidable species in the galaxy. What makes humans truly dangerous is simpler and far more profound. They can think like us better than we can think like them. And in the war of minds that's coming, that is the only advantage that matters. As the membrane sealed behind me, isolating me in the toxic storm, I heard the bold youngling's voice resonate, her vibrating at a frequency that carried clearly through the barrier. "Is there no defense against them?" she called. I turned back, my silhouette visible to them through the translucent material, the methane rain cascading around my scarred exoskeleton. "There is one," I replied, knowing this would be my final lesson to them. The same quality that makes them dangerous also makes them unique among all species we've encountered. Their empathic modeling doesn't just serve aggression. It enables understanding that transcends biology. If we approach them not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals worthy of genuine comprehension, their recursive consciousness might model us, not as threats to be neutralized, but as minds to be preserved. I turned away, my voice resonator producing its final statement as I disappeared into the storm. In the end, what makes humans the most dangerous species in the galaxy is the same quality that might make them the galaxy's salvation. They cannot encounter another mind without becoming both its perfect predator and its perfect ambassador.